Due to the graphic nature of this program, viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to today's broadcast. It's the Wednesday, July 22nd, 2026 episode of the Marco Dure Show, the only show where the facts are facts and hard truths thrive. Halfway through our week, ladies and gentlemen, let's get right down to brass tacks. We don't have a lot of time today. As you know, an hour goes by very quickly, and I want to jump right into these very important topics that we need to discuss today. I see nobody else talking about them, so let's jump into it, shall we? I want to start the program off talking with you about the 2027 National Defense Authorization Act that is set to be voted on sometime this afternoon. It has yet to be voted on just yet. But there are several different sections in this that really make me worried about the direction that our nation is taking right now. Now, why do I say this to you? Because there are several different sections of this legislation that merge the United States military with that of Israel's military. Now, I want to read you a couple of these sections just so you're clear on all this. And then afterwards, we'll kind of delve in and break this down just a little bit more. But there are several different areas that I'm very concerned about. I don't see how we have a representation actually voting for this. Let's break down this a little bit. Section 219 says U.S.-Israel Defense Technology Cooperation creates a bilateral defense tech initiative. And the Israelis would actually have an executive agent for this research and development of this program. They would work on testing together. The industrial integration would be essentially merged together. And this would cover a wide range of things. AI, electronic warfare, counter unmanned aerial systems, the missile development, sensors, you name it. Everything is falling under this umbrella. And the Israeli military will have great access to this. It gets even worse, though. Section 1234. Let's shut the door on this one. Iron Dome, David Slings, Aero Co-Development. This reauthorizes the U.S.-Israel Missile Defense Cooperation, funding lines for Iron Dome interceptors, and co-production. So this actually directs the DoD to report to the United States integration of Israel's missile defense technology. Again, this is all us. Everything that the Israelis use for weaponry and the IDF, we fund all that. We give them at least $3.8 billion every single year. Of course, they come back and buy what they want. But this is totally different. This is completely merging and acquiring both to become one of the same. There is no difference between the two. Let's be very clear about that. That's exactly what this legislation says. And again, there's other sections in this as well. But I think the most troubling part about all this, really and truly, Congress blocked its own members from even voting on a plan to merge the U.S. and Israeli military supply chains. And the House Rules Committee refused to allow a vote on the amendment challenging Section 219. So this would be, again, of the NDAA. This would obviously put everything as one, and they won't even let members of Congress refute this. Even Tom Massey's own account says that no debate or vote was allowed on Section 219, the integration of the U.S. military technology and supply chains with Israel's. Ro Khanna, a close ally of his, says we don't even have the chance to vote in the House to stop Israel and the United States from co-producing weapons. Let that sink in. I mean, again, this provision advances $38 billion in aid towards this 2028 partnership replacement. God, folks. I mean, it just seems to be getting worse and worse when we look at what's going on. And this is not just having an ally. This is just we're doing every single thing for them. And this comes at a time when our own defense systems, our own offensive systems, our own stockpiles are being depleted beyond recognition as this war with Iran continues on. So why is this not being discussed on the mainstream legacy media? Why is no one talking about this? The United States military is ready to merge with a foreign power. Can you imagine what our founders would think about this? And it doesn't have to be Israel. It can be any government, by the way. I'd be opposed to it. It doesn't make any bit of sense to me why there needs to be this necessary merge, except for the fact that they want to limit the president's authorization of certain types of weaponry to get to where they want it to go. That's what it's all about. So when we read all this, some people go, well, it's not that big of a deal, Gerace. They're just kind of working together. Well, why are they working together with a foreign government? Why? Now, it's one thing to let them buy from us. That's one thing, if we have the ability to do so. And it's a complete other thing to merge the two together, to make them as one, to limit what a president can or cannot do. Now, you'll say, well, it's only fiscal year 2027. What's stopping him in 2028? I mean, let's be realistic here. This opens up the door, of course, to litigation. I would have to say, I don't know how this is constitutional to merge two different militaries together in this sort of sense that, again, they're essentially just one of the same. I really don't understand this. I don't approve of this, and I don't think you should as well. We have got to become independent, ladies and gentlemen, on many different fronts, militarily, of course. But this is the same Israeli government that went in last June amid these negotiations with the Iranians, where President Trump was going to get a great deal, by the way. I was championing it all the way through. I said, this is going to be fantastic. And then what does the Israeli government do? They go in and start bombing them with our own bombs. Killing several different people, killing nuclear scientists, if you will. No one seems to give a damn. They say, well, Trump later was enthusiastic about it. Maybe he was in on it the entire time. I really don't know. But this is our ally. They're stymieing and thwarting different types of negotiations. Right now, they won't even commit to working with us in Iran, a war that they started. It was the Iranians, ladies and gentlemen, that went in first and, of course, killed Ayatollah Khamenei, his wife, his daughter-in-law, his granddaughter, members of the IRGC. And we're shocked that the Iranians are in the street and they're pissed about this? You can't make this stuff up. Imagine if that happened in the United States, folks. Let's throw that out there. Can you imagine if something as ridiculous as that happened inside the United States? Can you imagine witnessing that and seeing that? But this is what we are supporting right now. We are supporting all-out war. We're not even acknowledging international law. We're not acknowledging rules of engagement. And it's completely and utterly out of control. And so, again, I say this to you, ladies and gentlemen, because we should be up in arms about this, and yet very few people seem to know about it or even really care about it. This should not stand. And I do hope that there is litigation against this. And really, this comes down to treason, ladies and gentlemen. You are voting to merge our own military with a foreign power? How could anyone see that this is proper or even constitutional? This sort of legislation should be shot down right away. It shouldn't even see the light of day. And so we'll see who is a traitor today and who is not a traitor. I don't see any serious person. How could they vote for this? How could they vote for this? Unless they're playing for the other side. We'll see how that works out today, and we'll report on that in greater detail tomorrow. Also on the Hill yesterday was Pete Hegseth, who was chastised by members of the U.S. Senate. And really what this comes down to, Pete Hegseth was obviously there to ask for more money, ask for more allocation of money and what have you. It doesn't shock me, of course, because we know that our missile systems are depleted greatly. Our stockpiles are very low. As this war continues on, it's going to get much, much worse. I guess we can thank Joe Biden for this as well, that he was giving ample amounts of weaponry to the Ukrainians, much of which entered the black market and was not even used in the war, if you can believe that. But this is a problem. Now, there's several different things that he was discussing about where this money would go. He's asking for, I believe, $80 billion, if I'm not mistaken here. It's 75 to nearly $80 billion. Okay, that's what the Hill is telling us. To replenish stockpiles spent during the Iran war and to fund other Trump administration priorities. Okay. Now we know that the Big Beautiful Bill Act last year gave billions of unspent funding to the military, and that's why several Democrats are asking the question, why again? Why are we allocating even more money now? Why are you coming and asking us for more? You can't even give us an objective about what we're reaching in this war. What does winning look like? We're not being told any of this. Now, Pete Hegseth warns of the training cuts without immediate funding. The lack of payment to members of the military would be problematic. We've seen this several times before, of course, but it would put a strain on those in the military that are active, that are working, which I agree is a problem, of course. But again, we still have half of the $150 billion they have not yet spent. So where is it? He was questioned about this, Pete Hegseth, but he said that the funding had already been earmarked for the Trump administration's priorities, such as building the Golden Dome missile defense system and scaling up production of hypersonic missiles, which we don't have yet, but the Iranians have, which is not good. So he's talking about reallocating different projects for the Trump administration. We can't take that money and use it here, so therefore give us more money again. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I would ask, what have you already spent this money on? How much have you actually spent? Now, he says that they spent some $37.5 billion. I think that's a bluff. I think that's just incorrect. The figures I was getting, every single day of this war cost at least anywhere between $1 to $2 billion. Now, folks, we're in month 4 of this, by the way, so let's say we spent on the low end. We spent at least $1 billion every single day of this war. That's much greater than, a month and some change every day, right? We're probably greatly exceeding that, not to mention the damage to our air bases all in the region, by the way, that is estimated to cost over at least $100 billion. Now, he took a little bit of a shellacking from Senator John Ossoff of Georgia. Let me play you this clip right now just to start things off. Let's see how Pete Hegseth did. And it didn't seem that he did very well in this, folks. Let me play this for you, and then we'll break it down.
The second week of the conflict, you stated that Iran's military had been, quote, destroyed and, quote, made combat ineffective. Was that an accurate statement?
What the American military has done to the Iranian military is a historic military defeat.
Will you answer the question under oath?
In that context.
Secretary, early in the conflict, day 3, you said one of those core objectives was to, quote, destroy the missile threat. And as you restated on day 5, to, quote, obliterate Iran's missiles and drones. Those were clearly and repeatedly stated core objectives of the campaign, which 4 months ago you declared had been completed victoriously with every single objective achieved. Were those objectives achieved 4 months ago?
No one ever stated that every single missile was gone. Ultimately, combat ineffective means they're not able to dig them out of their UGFs and shoot at us.
Had the missile threat
It doesn't mean they don't have underground
4 months
facilities
ago?
where they put missiles in them and hold on to them because they're the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism. So we never expected they would stop having capabilities to shoot. The question is at scale against an opponent like the United States of America.
So then how are they still hitting targets? That's what I want to know. How are they still hitting these targets if their stockpiles are depleted, which we were told before this even resumed? We're now on day 12 of this resumption, going back and forth night after night. So where are they getting these extra stockpiles from? Why have we not hit them? If we're hitting targets, wouldn't that be a great idea to hit their stockpiles? Hit them hard? So what are we actually hitting right now? He really can't answer the question. He never answers if their military has been defunct, which we were told their Navy's supposed to be defunct. Their air defense systems are supposed to be also defunct. So then how are they still firing on us? Now they're striking well into Jordan. They have killed 4 different U.S. military members. They've wounded several others. This is coming directly from CENTCOM. God knows if there's even more that we haven't been told about. So the question asks, what is the objective? Originally, they said we wanted to go in there and take out their missile capabilities. Well, we obviously didn't do that. He did say that a couple of months ago. So which is it? Are we there for the military capabilities? We're obviously not stopping that. Are we there for the nuclear dust, which you said last June was obliterated? Right? President Trump said it. Pete Hegseth said it. Marco Rubio said it. They all kept saying it over and over again, as if to even convince themselves. Oh, yeah, the stockpiles have been depleted. Right, they also don't have any more nuclear dust. We've obliterated it. It's buried underground. They can't get access to it. So then the question begs, why are we resuming this war then? Sounds like we've accomplished everything. Oh, we've got to open up the Strait of Hormuz, don't we? Oh, right, we got to do that too. But that was open before the war began, so why not just leave? Why not just get the hell out of there? What is the current objective? What do we need to hit? And what outcome are we expecting in this conflict? They can't ever tell us this answer. Now, we continue to hear that they want to make a deal, They really don't want to make a deal, folks. I know that upsets a lot of people when I tell them that, but that is the truth of the matter. The Iranians are not looking to make a deal. We know that China really wants Pakistan to try to revive this memorandum of understanding back with the U.S. and Iran. But the Iranians understand they're on a course where the U.S. is on a very strict timeline because we are depleting our resources. It's not the other way around. Originally, President Trump said they have about 21% of their overall stockpiles from the start of this war. So it sounded like everything was depleted pretty much. They've used 80% of what they have. So it sounds like it's a waiting game. Okay, let's continue to wait. Let's continue to attack. Let's get them to react. And soon enough, they'll be out of ammunition, and then we are the victors. Well, that didn't happen. And we're seeing again, night after night, they're hitting harder. They're hitting desalination plants. They are threatening to, again, hit other air bases in the region, which, again, we know they hit Muwafaq Salty Air Base in Jordan. Again, they're hitting these targets with precision. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're using a system coming from China, by the way. I was going to talk to you on the show yesterday about this. It's called Beidou, and it acts as almost like a GPS system, except the system that they were using originally on the 12-Day War was not this. That's why we're seeing this time around their system is allowing for more accuracy as to what they hit and where they would like to hit, which is no good for the United States, of course. But that's why everything has been improving for the Iranians. So think of it like a GPS tracker, right? They were using a system that could be conflicted with what we can use. And they weren't really hitting targets significantly. I mean, they were hitting targets, but it wasn't to a strict T. And notice they're not hitting civilian infrastructure as well. Of course, now they're starting to hit desalination plants because they say, okay, if you're going to strike nuclear power plants, if you're going to start striking energy sectors, if you're going to start hitting civilian infrastructure, we're going to start hitting these sites inside of Kuwait and Bahrain and Qatar and Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Well, let's start striking these targets too then. If that's the way the United States is going to play. And they made good on that promise. So my question is, what's the next step? Where do we go from here? What does a win look like? They never seem to be able to answer them. I do want to stay on this point, though, for just one moment before we talk about what President Trump is planning to do next. This comes from Mario Nawfal, and he had a chart up on his program yesterday. I took a screenshot of this. And the amount of weaponry we've used, the munitions that have been used in this war. So, for instance, we used at least 1,000 different Tomahawk missiles just using the Iran war. THAAD missiles, anywhere between 190 and 290. Patriot missiles, 1,060 to 1,430. We look at JASSMs, over 1,100. So we've gone through a lot of our stockpile. Now, here's the problem. The other side of the chart shows how much was created in, 2026. A very minute number of all the munitions used for each of these categories, you'll see. So, for instance, they only delivered 207 different Tomahawk missiles this year. Well, we used over 1,000 of them. And by the way, we're continuing to do that day after day. But they estimate the return to pre-war inventory just for a Tomahawk missile, which again takes several years, is anywhere between late 2030 and early 2031. So President Trump will be out of office for quite some time before we even get back to a normal level. That's just one example. THAAD missiles, mid to late 2029. Patriot missiles, mid 2029, JASSMs, mid 2027. So it's going to be different. But here's the problem. This isn't being discussed. China holds the cards on a lot of this because, as I've told you before, they refine all the rare earth minerals in the world. Now, what they have come out and said, and by the way, several of these missiles of which we use, they require different types of rare earths. So I think, for instance, the Patriot may take 18 of them. The JASSMs may take 4 or 5 of them. So there's many that go into this missile system. Without it, they don't work. They don't function. But what China has come out recently and said, and this is smart on China's behalf, they've said, we're not giving you these rare earths for any type of military purpose. So now they're holding the cards on what our own military can actually do because we don't produce it. What did I tell you probably at least a couple months ago now? I said we need to start refining rare earths right here in the United States. We used to do it. We don't do it anymore. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, we used to be the #1 refiner of rare earths in the world in the 1970s and the 1980s. That went away, of course, just like every other thing. But this is, again, we can't rely on this. You cannot rely on China, who is trying to vie against us as the #1 world superpower, to take control of all of our rare earth minerals and refine them for us. And by the way, they refine over 90% of all the rare earths in the world. So they refine for all these other countries as well. But right now, what they're saying is that, hey, we can control exactly what you do, and we will just simply not give you various types because you're not using this for military purposes. So you can forget all about it. This, no one's talking about this. This is very, very troubling, folks, to hear this, that another country can really determine what our military is able to produce and to have. Again, as this war goes on, the amount of weaponry we have, that number is going to diminish significantly. So we're very low on our stockpiles. I mean, it just shows you in the chart. This is what they're presenting to us. So when they say, it's going to take us, X number of years, it takes several years just to produce one. What's produced today will take a couple years down the road. Now, they're coming out and saying, for instance, what they'll use is they're going to try to fast track it using other types of technology, which I don't know if that'll be effective or not. But this is what they're trying to lead us on to. Oh, it'll be very quick. We're going to fast-pace the process. Well, some of these are made by hand, too. So we're looking at 5 years, maybe, for Tomahawk missiles? Really? I mean, this is, again, what do we use for self-defense, then? If we're losing JASSMs, we're losing the Patriots, the THAAD missiles, all that. We need all this, folks. We need this for our own inventory to have. I mean, if you're China, you're Russia looking at this. I mean, this is very shocking. We've got to take care of our own. I can't stress this enough to you. We've got to start doing this on our own. And even Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, he's even coming out and asking the same question I'm asking you. What does a win look like? Let's see what he says.
Guys, we need straight answers. We need straight answers. Do we have the ability to destroy whatever is underneath Pickaxe Mountain?
Senator, a lot of our capabilities are classified, but if anybody in the world can reach anything on God's green earth, it's the United States military, the most powerful military in the world. It's all about options and trade-offs.
Options and trade-off. Okay, so let's answer the question then. Can we actually hit it? He doesn't answer the question. He didn't say give us the plan of what you're going to utilize to do it. Which brings me to the next point. President Trump now has been honing on about going after Pickaxe Mountain. This is located right by the Natanz enrichment plant. It's very close by, same vicinity in central Iran. And what they're suggesting is that there could be at least 6,000 nuclear centrifuges assembled per year right here in Pickaxe Mountain. That obviously could be utilized to enrich uranium to help produce nuclear weapons, should they choose to do so. Obviously, I don't believe that's taking place. Although I think we're getting Iran closer to this position. If the Iranians believe that the United States is not serious about negotiations, they will develop a nuclear weapon. Believe me when I tell you this. Now, this mountain has a height of 1,608 meters above sea level, while the facility itself is estimated to be 100 meters deep under the mountain. This is, again, coming from the Institute for Science and International Security. But since the U.S. struck the 3 Iranian nuclear sites back in 2025, that would be Natanz, Fordow, Isfahan, construction at Pickaxe Mountain has accelerated since then, of course. Makes sense. The Iranians obviously understood what was going on, and the Iranians move various things from site to site. It's not unheard of. We know the Iraqis did this as well during the Iraq War. So while we were blowing up empty buildings, by and large, I'm sure we blew up some empty buildings here in Iran as well, they still have access to all this type of technology. That's just the truth of the matter. So let me ask you this question, though. What does bombing Pickaxe Mountain do? Do we anticipate there is nuclear technology there? Are they building something? What does our intelligence tell us? Nobody seems to be able to do so. So I don't know what bombing Pickaxe Mountain does. It seems as if it's a pipe dream to get the Iranians to say, please, please don't do this anymore, but I don't see that happening. Certainly not by a long shot. And by the way, I want to go over this really quickly before we move on, ladies and gentlemen, to my next story. But I want you to hear all this. This is very crucial. I got this from Pepe Escobar yesterday. And what he said was that on July 20th, this was the deadline for the United States to really kind of begin to work with the Iranian government to sit down and get this negotiation underway. That was set in motion to start by July 20th. It has not happened, as we see this resuming of the conflict and bombing back and forth on all fronts. And what I was told was that this ultimatum was given through the White House, through mediators in Pakistan. And of course, we know that China has been working Pakistan to kind of revive this memorandum of understanding, which, again, I believe it's dead in the water. But what they're suggesting is that if the United States continues all this bombing, the negotiations are essentially off. This is the Iranians' new position. They've come to the table, what now, 3 times? 3 times the charm? I don't know, ladies and gentlemen. They came to meet with us back in June of 2025. Remember what Pete Hegseth just said? And they got all these missiles underground because they're the number 1 state sponsor of terror. So, again, I think that's just a baseless term. You know, because I've told you. Iran isn't anywhere even close to being the number 1 state sponsor of terrorism in the world. Pete Hegseth uses this line. It's on Fox News a lot. I like Fox News, but this is a complete lie. It's a complete and utter lie. Way over 80% of all the terror attacks, actual terror attacks using violence to achieve a political purpose, comes from Sunni Muslim terror groups. That'd be like the Taliban. That would be like ISIS. This would be like Al-Qaeda. This would be like Hayat Tahrir Hashem, which the new president of Syria was just involved with. Right, the guy leading Syria was a head chopper, a hand chopper, a murderer of American service members. And yet President Trump has him in the White House and is buddy-buddy with him now. He was literally on the terror watch list. And wanted by the United States, had a bounty on his head, and now we bring him to the White House and give him a shave and put him in a suit, and everything's supposed to be great now. This guy was a real terrorist. Yet we attribute the Iranians with being the number 1 state sponsor of terrorism, which, again, ladies and gentlemen, the Iranian government has not attacked a foreign nation since, I believe, 1789. They've never attacked any of their neighbors since 1789. That was the last time. So where is all this state sponsor of terrorism coming from then? When have they launched missiles into any of their neighboring countries or Europe or other parts of Central Asia? When does this happen? Can anyone point to a time when this took place? Now, some people will argue, well, Jerez, come on, they fund Hezbollah. We've debunked this stupidity time and time again. Well, they funded Hamas. Again, we've debunked this time and time again. Why did these groups form? Let's be honest. Why did Hezbollah form? Because of Israel's illegal occupation starting in 1978 in southern Lebanon. Hezbollah formed in the mid-1980s as a deterrent, as a military function to get rid of them. And that's what they've done as recently as 2006 to kick them out of their country. Had Israel not been in southern Lebanon, you would not have a Hezbollah today. And by the way, this is a political party inside of Lebanon. Again, they're Shia Muslims, so naturally the Iranians tend to coexist with them and support them. But that's why they're there. They're not there as a terror group to the north to invade Israel or anything of the such. They're there as a deterrent because we know that the U.S. puppet government inside of Lebanon doesn't do a damn thing about it. That's the truth of the matter. That's why these things happen. So anyways, let's get back to my other point, though, here. But, since yesterday, we've seen, of course, the U.S. was persisting. We expect to see this again this evening with more strikes, of course, of the continuing bombings by the United States. The negotiations are dead. That's what it really comes down to. They've hit Tehran, they've hit Tabriz, they've hit Bashir, Sharik, many different sites all throughout the country. So it seems to me the talks would likely be dead But when will the Iranians actually realize that the Israelis and the United States do not want to negotiate? When will they come to terms saying, you know what, this is over. Nothing's going to happen anymore. We're not going to sit down. We're not going to come with good faith again, only to be bombed yet again. That they never honor a ceasefire. Pete Hegseth, of course, lied, right? With the number one state sponsor chair. But we continue to hear that the Iranians restarted this war for us because they attacked various ships. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me just share this with you. The United States had no business directing traffic through the Strait of Hormuz using the Iranian portion of the strait itself. None of that was in the Memorandum of Understanding. So the question you have to ask yourself is, why do they do this? And by the way, the day before this attack on these three vessels by the Iranians, no doubt about it, I'm not denying that, they let out a warning. They said, listen, you are going to coordinate with us. Anyone that is trying to do otherwise or using what the United States is telling you to do, you're violating this and you will be hit. Well, what happened to those three vessels? What happened to that liquefied natural gas tanker from Qatar? It got hit. It caught fire. Now, thankfully, it was empty. Otherwise, it probably would have exploded. But this is the reality of the situation. We had no business being there. In the memorandum, the text is very clear that the Iranians will make all concessions for all traffic to traverse with no tolls, but they will coordinate with us. They will make all the arrangements. The United States signed off on this. President Trump's signature is on that document. Doesn't say anything about the United States will help escort ships through the Omani side. That's not what it says. It doesn't say anything either about, well, if the Iranians decide to strike vessels for doing something against their command, that the United States will then resume the war. I believe this was just our stance to accelerate the war yet again, get involved with it. Either we got more stockpiles or we got more troops in the region or what have you. We never fully removed our naval blockade. We never ended the war between Israel and Lebanon. That war is continuing on to this day. We never gave them their frozen assets. They were supposed to do all that. We never gave them the reconstruction money. We never did that. So when we say we honor this memorandum, we never did from day one. Yeah, folks, I'm being realistic. I'm telling you the truth. We just never did it. So how can we sit here and say the Iranians restarted this war when they were the ones that, again, opened up the strait, they allowed traffic to go through? None of that took place from the Iranians. They held their end of the bargain. By the way, it was really a capitulation by the U.S. to sign that anyway. Whether Trump knew that or not, whether he read it or not, I have no idea. But we didn't honor it. We just simply did not honor it, folks. Just like we didn't honor the other round of negotiations. We were telling the Iranians in good faith we were going to meet with them. That never took place. And on February the 28th, we decided to let Israel go in and bomb them and, of course, martyr the Ayatollah. Look how that's working out. Now you have even more pissed off Iranians, and Iraqis too, by the way, with no end in sight to this war. None whatsoever. We don't know what winning looks like. We don't know what objectives we're trying to reach right now. We're hearing from Pete Hegseth. Well, it was missiles originally. It was regime change originally. Now it's about getting rid of the nuclear dust, which you said was already obliterated. Now we're talking about opening up the strait, which was opened up before the war began. So which is it, Pete? Which is it, President Trump? What are we doing in the region? What is the goal here? What are we expecting to happen here? Just bombing all parts of Iran? Well, again, they know, the Iranians know they have 10 or so targets that they could hit strategically and that will weaken the U.S.'s capability to stage and, of course, facilitate these attacks, by the way. But everything's on the table still. The Iranians are hitting their sights and they're starting to hit harder. We're starting to hit harder, but nothing is changing. The Iranians do not want to make a deal. And I fear what I have told you a couple weeks ago, that if the talks fail, you will see the Iranians drop out of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. If that does happen, you will see them actually, this time around, develop a nuclear weapon. This is the path we're on. So President Trump either needs to make a deal or get the hell out of there. Otherwise, we're giving them all the reason in the world to say, you know what? Enough's enough. We've come to the table 3 times now with them. We've signed documents now with them, and nothing is happening. Now they're attacking us yet again because of how we're operating in the strait, which we're controlling. We gave the terms of how to get through, and people were defying it based on what the United States did. So if the United States hadn't done that, God knows we wouldn't be in the situation. So it brings up all these different scenarios, of course, but we definitely want this war to continue. The memorandum was just a way to wait to get things in order again to restart this conflict. That's all it really was, folks. We never had any intention of honoring it. And again, I tell you this, I wanted this to happen, of course, but again, this did not happen, unfortunately. I think it's dead. I don't think there's any round for negotiation. I think this ends now on the battlefield. Who can outlast who? That's what it comes down to. And it looks as though the Iranians will be the ones that do it. Because we haven't defeated them, right? You heard Hegseth in that one clip. Oh, we defeated them back in... No, you didn't. You didn't defeat them. Because if you defeated them, they wouldn't be continuing to fire rockets. They wouldn't be killing our military service members. I mean, this wouldn't be happening right now if they were defunct. They're obviously clearly able to do so. And by the way, folks, just to show you how, again, I don't understand President Trump's logic in any of this, but again, this topic will make you shake your head. I'm sure it makes me shake my head. This comes from the New York Post. It says here, President Trump has now approved a nuclear deal with Saudi Arabia that could leave the Middle Eastern kingdom enriching its own uranium. Isn't that nice? So now we're ramping up the war. Maybe in the future, instead of the United States going in and bombing, maybe then we can have the Saudis go in and do it for us. It seems to be the likely scenario. So the deal expected to be formally announced later Wednesday and submitted to Congress soon thereafter. I can't see Congress going through with this, proliferating more nuclear weapons in the world. And by the way, I believe the Saudis probably likely already have a weapon system. This is probably just going to bolster it up. But it says will be in effect through 2056 and will be worth tens of billions of dollars. Now, what they want to do here, they want various U.S. companies, I'm sure it would be the military security industrial complex, to come into Saudi Arabia, develop these weapons, and have our own type of nuclear weapons system in the region, probably to deter Iran in the future. I think that's what it comes down to. So if we're talking about the Iranians looking at what's going on and saying, gee, I wonder what we should do. Should we try to make a deal? Should we try to come to the table every time? Or should we actually develop nuclear weapons ourselves? Because we know Israel has them. They're not supposed to have them, but we know they have them. The world knows they have them. And now the Saudis are coming out saying, we have them now, or we'll have them in the future. So what would the Iranians do? What would China and Russia do, by the way? Or even the Pakistanis? They're going to probably say, you know what? We're probably going to have to give you some, and you're going to start developing on your own. This is going to be the end result of this. Trump is leading the Iranians to develop their own nuclear weapon. He's not deterring them. He's pushing them in that direction. Because if they feel they have no ground for negotiation or that the United States will hold to its word, which we have not in any of these times, they're going to develop a nuclear weapon. And I think that's the path they're on. I was praying to God that this would not happen, but this is the route they're on. So when they hear this, when they hear that the United States and Washington and Riyadh are working together to develop nuclear weapons or nuclear technology or the path for enriching uranium, they're going to say to themselves, this is what they want. They want this deterrent right across the Persian Gulf so that the United States has a base right there that they can operate, again, should this take place. Now, the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has long warned that if the Iranians developed a nuclear weapon, his country would do so as well. Well, you probably already have one. So I think we'll see both emerge with having nuclear technology very, very soon. Can you imagine that, though? We elected President Trump to be the peace candidate. He said he's not going to start wars. He's going to end wars. He's going to be the president of peace. Unlike Joe Biden, we all bought that line. And now we have different countries now developing nuclear weapons because I don't even know what he wants to do. Again, the thinking behind any of this, that we would let Israel go in and start bombing and killing people. Again, I would have never imagined this if you told me this 2 years ago when Trump was running back in 2020. I would have never believed this. He never ran on this. He never suggested he would do anything like this. So it's very shocking to all of us, of course, that this is taking place. But this is making the world a much more unstable place. And again, the Middle East will remain that way. But now you have a nuclear-armed Saudi Arabia. That means I think you can say Greater Israel, at least taking the Saudi land, is probably null and void as well. This is going to be a strategic failure on so many levels, folks. And again, I don't understand President Trump's foreign policy. This is not making sense to me. This is not promoting peace. This is not ending wars. This is starting new tension in the region, sadly enough. And, ladies and gentlemen, I want to bring things back to the United States. Let me bring our attention over to another topic that I really want to share with you. The Democratic Socialists of America, right, with this new emerging faction inside the United States. What they want to do now, right? We know their end goal is communism, through and through. There's no doubt in my mind that this party, this faction of the Democratic Party, wants communism. They recently released a new program that just came out, and what they would like, besides a classless society, at least what they claim is a classless society. We know that no communist country really ever is. Of course, we have the ultra-rich people on top. You see that from the top down. And, of course, you have all the poor people and the peasants on the bottom, of course. That's where they like most of us to be. But now they're calling for abolishing the United States Senate, the presidency, and even the Supreme Court. Why do they want that? Well, of course, it'd be easier just to jam in their own policies. They would have some leader, apparently, and I guess they would be the end-all, be-all. They would have a unicameral party. That would be, I guess, the House of Representatives. That way it's easier just to jam through this type of legislation that have nobody checking it. And again, I don't know who's going to sign this into law. Would it just be this one body, this almost parliamentary faction, to do so? I think that would be their probably end goal of all this. This is what they want to do. This is literally a revolution to topple the American system. And yet we allow this to take place inside of our country. Why do we allow this to happen? Seriously, why do we sit here and allow this to happen? Why do we bring in people that want to continue to destroy our nation time after time and we say nothing about it? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to play you, first and foremost, I want to play you this young woman in Colorado. Her name is Milat Kiros, and she just won her primary in this Democratic seat inside of Colorado, which is becoming more left as the time goes on. Used to be a red state until all the Californians fled and moved to Colorado and are now doing to Colorado what happened to California. But this is her speaking. I want you to hear exactly what she says. They're saying the quiet parts out loud. And believe you me, this is exactly what they want to do.
I think it's particularly important, not just for our community in Tigray, but communities of the global South, period, right? There's a certain reckoning that we are going to have with the global world order as it exists today and the way that it fundamentally will have to shift going forward, right? The responsibility that we have as Americans, the recognition that is going to be required of us, of the exploitative and extractive nature that we play on the global scale and the global stage is only going to be challenged if we are getting represented by people who understand that on a fundamental level, right? And that means getting more immigrants into office. That means getting more people who have heritage in the global South into office, because that's where those decisions are made specifically.
So what she's saying is she would like to get more immigrants into these positions of power, whether it be governorship or city council or in Congress or what have you. This is the plan. This is the plan. If enough people come in that do not share our values, that don't care about it, this is their policy. This is how they will get things done. This is how they get different type of legislation for different parts of the world even. This is how they would like to do so. Now, again, you can sit there and go, well, she's just talking, Gerace, about how she doesn't want any imperialism. That's beside the point. I don't want imperialism either. I want us to take care of our own country. You understand that. But this woman, what she wants to do is totally subject the United States to change the existing government. That's what she wants. And if you bring in enough people that do not care about that, or would, let's say, they would start allocating money to go to Africa, or to Asia, or to Central America, or South America, or bring in more people from these countries, you totally subjugate the entirety of the country. That's what it's all about. This is the takedown of the country. Remember what I told you before. The way the Roman Empire fell was because they stopped producing young Romans. Well, likewise, if you start bringing in people that do not share those values, that do not raise young Americans, that have their bona fides somewhere else, like in Africa, or I think she's from Ethiopia. Or it could be Central America, it could be South America, it could be anywhere else, doesn't matter. It could be coming from China, doesn't matter. This is all about taking down the existing government. This is what it's all about. There's no other way to say that to you. So the Senate being dismantled is just one step in that direction. They also want to get rid of the Supreme Court. Why? Because, this is interesting to me, too. I was listening to Jonathan Turley the other day. He was speaking at the Richard Nixon Library. Beautiful library, by the way. If you're in California, you should definitely go check it out. What he said, though, he was asked a question. I forget the question itself. But what he said was that the Supreme Court is really our last stand against a lot of this bad policy coming from the left. And the reason that is because if they pack the court, or if they get their candidates in that will usher in these bad policies, like, for instance, removing the Senate, God forbid that ever were to happen. I don't know how that would even happen. But if they were able to be successful in a lot of these bad policies, if you have a lot of these partisan judges, these activist judges, that will allow this bad legislation to come through, to foment, to divide the nation, to corrupt the nation, to give power to one party, we cease to have a country. And we have to be very clear about this. If the conservatives lose the court, and it's sad to see that we have John Roberts as the Chief Justice. He sides in a lot of these high-profile cases with the left on this, unfortunately. Same thing goes with Amy Coney Barrett. Same thing happens, right? We were expecting good legislation, just like when we had the birthright citizenship case. We're like, okay, this is good. We'll get in. We'll make sure that, if you're here legally and you have a child, that is not an American citizen. That child is a citizen of whatever country you came from. Then, of course, you have the courts ruling on behalf that, no, that's what it means. If you're just born here, you're a citizen. That's great. Well, that's not what the legislation says. This is all part of a much bigger problem. We have justices that ignore the original text. That's a problem in and of itself. That's a problem we've had in the past as well. But this is a very, very crucial point. You have people inside the United States that want to take down the government. They have different ways in which they want to use it. We know, for instance, AOC is one of these people, by the way. She sounded confused when she cited Senate practices created under Jim Crow. That's what it says here in the article. It says here that the system of formalized racial discrimination that arose about 100 years after the creation of the Senate. She said it's true that the filibuster was used as a tool to attempt to block landmark civil rights legislation. No, idiot. That's not what it was created for. This woman shouldn't even, I don't even know if she should even become a bartender again. She's so stupid. I can't believe this. The purpose of the Senate is that you have the entirety of the state voting for 2 representatives to go to D.C. that reflect the values of that given state. So in other words, California has 2 representatives, just like Colorado has 2 representatives, just like Wyoming or New York has 2 representatives. And all those legislators, they go to form the Senate, and they have equal representation. That's what it's all about. So they represent their given states in this legislation that is passed through by the House, right? This is what or vice versa. But in other words, you have equal representation, just like the Electoral College, which the Democrats hate as well. They hate the Electoral College. They don't want the Electoral College. Why don't they want it? Well, because, again, they want a one-size-fits-all. So when we talk about the Senate, a Senate is supposed to be a check on the House of Representatives. So in other words, California has far more representatives than Wyoming, which has 1, or North Dakota, which has 1, I believe, or Vermont, or whatever it may be. It doesn't matter. But when we talk about the Senate, we're talking about that state has equal representation in terms of passing legislation. That's why it was created. So when you hear an AOC who's so stupid she doesn't even understand anything about why it was set up that way, this is why we have it. This is why we have these checks. Because then, really, when you think about it, you'd have California, by and large. Look what Gavin Newsom's doing to California now, getting rid of more Republican representation, just right out there in the open, and they're saying it's totally fine. But you would have California, you'd have Illinois, you'd have, your New York You'd have your New Jersey, some of these other bigger states. And they would be the ones that determine the laws that go through. That would be it. And then nothing else passes through. Just get that majority, right? You can cheat in your state. That'd be totally fine. And there's no president to check it, right? Whatever passes goes through. You have no one in the judiciary to say, you know what, this is unconstitutional. Get through it. Just get through it. Just jam this legislation through. We'll have our communist utopia, or so we think. And that's it. The problem I don't understand with these people, though, is they come to the United States, they trash the system, they get rich off the system, or they do well off the system, and then they come in here and tell us how bad it is. Well, folks, if it's so bad, if it's so racist here, if it's so unjust, she's going back to Jim Crow era to say that this is, an illegal block of the legislation. Apparently, the filibuster's instrument of every minority party in the Senate to block the agenda of the presidents of the opposing party, very much including the Senate Democrats arraying against President Trump today. She's not a very smart one, folks. That's the purpose of it. That's why we have a filibuster. So when she's talking about, this creation, this radical racial discrimination that arose because of this creation of the Senate, what is she talking about? The filibuster now is racist too? Oh my God. Oh my Lord. And the purpose of this is, again, you have to have a majority vote. That's why we have a Senate. That's why we have the filibuster. That's why it's hard to just jam through legislation unless you have a majority of the votes. And that's why it's there. That's why we have this in place. That's why I don't want to nuke the filibuster, to be honest with you. But AOC is thinking long term, if she's thinking at all, but she's being told to say this, of course, that they want to make sure that they get things jammed through. And what's the best way to make sure that doesn't happen? Just get rid of the program itself. Get rid of it. Why do you have it? Just have a parliament. Have a parliament-style legislation. You get enough of your cronies through in California, in New York, in Illinois, in New Jersey, right? You get enough people through. Hey, Abigail Spanberger will help push that through too, right? Just get more people through. We'll redistrict. We'll do it. Maybe we'll even get Texas too. We'll do away with the Electoral College. That way we never lose anything ever again. I guess you wouldn't even have that, though, would you? If you have no president, you don't even need the Electoral College. You wouldn't be voting. You just have your representatives in your given states, and there you go. Everything would be turmoil. Can you imagine a leaderless country? Well, I don't think I'd like to. I don't know if they'll succeed with this. We'll obviously fight against this, ladies and gentlemen, but our country is being subjugated by these communists that come here from abroad. They hate this country. They hate you and I. They hate everything this country stands for. They hate our founding. They hate the founding fathers, and they want to take down the country. What I have suggested to you, and I'll say this to you again, we need to bring back HUAC. The House Un-American Activities Committee needs to be brought back. We need to look at these individuals, if they're immigrants to the country, if they're even just a part of this country, and they're trying to really subjugate the country to take it down, again, ushering communism. It's one thing to have that belief. It's one thing to get up and say, you know what, I like communism. I think it'd be great if we had it. And it's a complete different thing if you have people actively working behind the scenes to bring down the country itself. So we need to stop this through and through. We should not let this stand. We should not let this go. And we need to really get to work on this, folks. But bring back HUAC. Stop the communists. We have legislation in place that would obviously prevent communism from coming to. That's why we have this. That's why we had Eisenhower pass the Communist Act of 54. That's why we have these things. That's why they're in place. We don't want this to continue. And by the way, this brings me to my next point, too. This comes out of Just the News. It says the House Ways and Means Committee subpoenaed 3 left-wing nonprofits tied to Marxist tech tycoon Neville Singham. Now, here's another one of these bad actors that has lots of money that funds a lot of these bad programs to take down the government. Now, the subpoena itself is part of an investigation into more than the $39 million that went from Singham to these nonprofits, as Fox News tells us. But the 3 nonprofits are the People's Forum Incorporated, a New York-based activist hub, Breakthrough News, a left-wing nonprofit media outlet, and Tricontinental, the Institute for Social Research. I don't know, social, right? Communism. Now, the committee alleges that the three nonprofits failed to turn over any documents responding to earlier requests for this information, and they want to look into this. But my point in telling you all this Neville Singham is one of these bad actors. This guy has ties to promote pro-Chinese government propaganda right here in the United States. This guy's from the United States, too. But we need to look at activities by these people. We should not have people that are acting on behalf of foreign governments inside the country. That's why I've said to you also, let's get rid of FARA. Get rid of these lobbyists that lobby on behalf of foreign governments. Get rid of APEC. Get rid of it all. That's what we should be doing. Now, he could be a self-declared socialist. I could give less than a damn. He can be an admirer of Maoism, all he wants. I don't give a damn. But when you actually fund the takedown of the country, that's a much different story. We shouldn't be allowing this to take place, ladies and gentlemen. This should not happen. And if he loves China so much, why doesn't he get the hell out of here and go to China? That's what I want to say. But people like this exact person, the George Soroses of the world, the Open Society Foundation, which I call the Open Border Society Foundation, they helped channel that in under Joe Biden. Any of these people that are acting on behalf of taking the country down need to be charged. Bring HUAC back, look into these people 24/7, get to the bottom of this. Are they working on behalf of a foreign country? If they are guilty of treason and sedition, and they need to be jailed. That's their end goal, right? Everyone's the same in jail, right? They'll love it. Hey, it's great. Everyone goes to sleep at the same time. They eat the same food. I would take away the television sets, though, folks, and the iPhones. Let's do away with that, I'd have to say. Stop funding so much. Anyways, let me move on. We have a few minutes remaining in the program. I don't think I'll have enough time to get through this, but I want you to hear this insanity that took place just yesterday. The leader, or director, I should say, Anthea Hartig, was speaking with a congressional hearing yesterday, and it was as ridiculous as one could imagine, but she was pressed by Brandon Gill, and he did a great job of asking her what really her organization actually does. Take a listen to this on, let me see here, what do I got? Okay, here on clip 5.
Is objectivity one of the goals of history?
We strive to be objective and nonpartisan and not based on any ideology.
So it's one of the goals. Doesn't that seem a little bit concerning? It certainly does to me, because as part of this white supremacy document that your organization has promoted, objectivity is a core and defining aspect of white supremacy culture. Do you think that it's the goal of the Smithsonian Institution to promote white supremacy culture?
Sir, do you mind sharing with me which document?
It's white supremacy culture right here. This is part of the mass action toolkit that your organization has promoted for several years now under your leadership. Are you promoting a white supremacy culture at the Smithsonian?
Am I promoting a white?
Okay, the mind went blank. I have more of the clip up. We're running short on time. This woman, they have these, again, the Smithsonian is supposed to be about American history and what have you. There's different exhibits of certain science, arts, and what have you. I've been there before when I was a child. They have an exhibit called the Entertainment Nation, and this displays images of bondage and other adult content alongside a separate exhibit in which Tim Burchett of Tennessee asked, a 6-year-old girl is asked why she doesn't have a male genitalia. Why is this being promoted in the Smithsonian, folks? Why is this insanity? This left-wing nonsense, white supremacy? Brandon Gill went in to ask her, is Mickey Mouse racist? Can you imagine that a member of Congress has to ask the director of the Smithsonian if Mickey Mouse is quote-unquote racist? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think if that's being asked, I think we probably hit rock bottom with this institution. Which further lets me know that a lot of these institutions, ladies and gentlemen, have been taken over by the left. Again, this subversion of the culture, time and time again. Who do we see in front of it? It's the left. It's pushing us in that direction. And we've got to stop it, folks. I think we all can agree on that. And on that point, I'll end things there, folks. Thank you again for being here. Make sure you're always staying prepped with your essentials, your food, water, medicine, tools, ammunition, anything in these times of uncertainty. Please do so now when you can. Folks, enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you back here tomorrow, as always, on the next Marco Dre Show. Until then, stay busy, be good, God bless.